האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We are in the Zera Shimshon on the last Parsha in the Torah, the Parsha of V'Zot HaBracha, which of course we read every year on Simchas Torah. God willing, it should come as a beautiful and joyous holiday for all of Klal Yisrael soon, very soon, just a few days. So we're in Os Yud Aleph, section 11, which is the last piece in the Zera Shimshon on the Parsha of V'Zot HaBracha, and therefore the last piece in his commentary and his parish on Chumash. And it's a very, very fascinating piece. It's very long. We're only planning to do the first a couple of pages, but it's a very fascinating piece. And as you'll see, one of the goals, the first goal that he sets for himself is to connect the beginning of the Parsha V'Zot HaBracha with the end. So in order to be able to do that, let's read the first pasuk and in the Parsha V'Zot HaBracha, and then we'll read the last three psukim, which again, as you'll see, is very relevant to the Zera Shimshon's discussion. So the first pasuk says, V'Zot HaBracha, and this is the blessing, Asher Beirach Moshe, Ish HaElokim, that Moshe, the man of God, blessed, Es B'nai Yisrael, to B'nai Yisrael, Lifnei Moso, before his death. That's the first pasuk, the opening pasuk in the Parsha of V'Zot HaBracha, which is a very short Parsha. Now, the end of the Parsha concludes with the following three psukim. V'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe, and there never rose among the Jewish people a navi, a prophet like Moshe, asher yido Hashem panim el panim, that Hashem knew him face to face and had such a close and direct relationship with him. Next pasuk. L'chol ha'osos ve'hamofsim asher shelocho Hashem, for all of the signs and the wonders that Hashem sent him, la'asos be'eretz Mitzrayim, sent Moshe to do in the land of Mitzrayim, leFaro, against Pharaoh, u'lechol avadav, and against all of his servants, u'lechol artso, and to all of his land. Next pasuk, last pasuk in the Torah. U'lechol hayod hachazaka, and for all of the mighty hand, u'lechol hamora hagodol, and for all of the great fearful acts, asher asa Moshe, that Moshe did le'enei kol Yisrael, in the eyes of all of the Jewish people, and that is how the Parsha and the Torah conclude. And now let's get right into the Zera Shimshon on Os Yud Aleph. Lekasher sof haParsha imre shisa, in order to connect the end of the Parsha with the beginning of the Parsha of V'Zot HaBracha. V'sof haTorah im techilasa, and also in order to connect the end of the Torah with the beginning of the Torah. So those are the two goals that the Zera Shimshon sets out for himself, maps out for himself in the beginning of this piece. Nakdim levayer divrei Rashi olav hashalom. We will first introduce an explanation of the words of Rashi al pasuk V'Zot HaBracha, on the pasuk of V'Zot HaBracha. Asher Beirach Moshe, that Moshe blessed. That's the pasuk that we read. V'zeh l'shono, and this is the quote from Rashi. Lifnei Moso, Rashi brings out the words from the first pasuk where it says that Moshe blessed B'nai Yisrael before his death. So Rashi comments on those words before his death. She'im lo achshav emosai. If not now, when? Meaning, if Moshe, why did the Torah say he did it before his death? Because if it wasn't then, he knew he was going to die. Hashem had told Moshe he was going to die, so he had to bless them then because he couldn't delay. He couldn't put it off. There'd be no other time he could bless them unless he blessed them at that time before his demise. This is a problem. Lama hutzrich Rashi lefarish kach. why did Rashi feel the need to explain these words before his death in this way? V'halo, and isn't it true? Pshat hakosav, the simple explanation of the pasuk, Yuvan Shapir, could have been easily understood, meaning without Rashi saying this, the point that he made. We would have understood the pasuk in a very simple, clear way. Ki de'isa b'tanchuma, as it states in the Medrash Tanchuma, shederech tzadikim levarech es b'neihem, it is the way of the righteous to bless their children, samach lemisa, near the time, right before the time, or near the time of their death. V'chein matzinu b'Yitzchak, and we find this by Yitzchak Avinu in the Torah, where he says, calls in Esav, his eldest son, and he says to him, Va'avarechecha lifnei Hashem, I'm going to bless you before Hashem, lifnei mosi, before my death. So we see clearly that Yitzchak Avinu, the Torah explicitly states that he said to Esav that he wanted to bless him because he felt like he was going to die soon. V'chein Yaakov beirech es banav, and so too Yaakov Avinu blessed his sons, samach lemisa, near the time of his own demise, near the time of his death. So the Zera Shimshon says, why did Rashi feel a need to explain the words lifnei moso, before his death, meaning Moshe had to do it then, he was compelled to do it then, because otherwise he would have no more time to do it, when Rashi could have simply said that Moshe was following a time-honored tradition of blessing children before one's death, just like Yitzchak did and just like Yaakov Avinu did. Why not just take that simple approach as opposed to Rashi's comment that he actually made? V'yesh lomar, the next paragraph, and we can say, Shahadovar Yodua, it is a well-known thing, Shebizman shemischalesh ba'adam koach haguf, that at the time that a person's body is weakened, misgaber bo koach haneshama, the power of his neshama, his soul, grows stronger. V'zehu hatam shahayoshev b'tainis, and this is the reason why Chazal tell us in Masechta Tainis that someone who is fasting, nikra kadosh kenoda, is called a holy person. Why is someone who fasts called a kadosh, a holy person? Because since the fasting weakens the individual's body, then the person's neshama correspondingly grows stronger. And if a person's neshama becomes stronger, then they can embrace, they can contain more kedusha, then they are considered a kadosh, a holier person. V'lochein, and therefore, had tzadikim mevarchim es b'neihem be'oso zman, shenechalash koach gufam. Tzadikim choose very consciously, very purposefully to bless their children before their deaths as their bodies weaken, because that's when they know this idea that that's when their neshamas strengthen, their neshamas gain strength at the time when their bodies become weaker. And so that is a very appropriate, a highly appropriate time, an ideal time for them to bless their children. Their holiness, they're imbued with a greater kedusha, their souls, their neshamas are growing stronger and more powerful as their bodies weaken. So that is why tzaddikim bless their children at that time. V'nisrabe koach nishmasam, and as the Zera Shimshon said, the strength of their souls is increasing at this time. Uchtichsiv, as the pasuk in Tehillim says, Tosef rucham yigva'un. Now, these words we have to explain for a moment. In the pasuk itself, these words are generally translated in the simple way to translate them that fits what the pasuk is. Tosef rucham, when you gather in their spirit, their ruach, yigva'un, they perish. It's talking about all of the creatures in the world, and it's saying that Hashem nourishes and takes care of and provides sustenance for all of the creatures in the world. And also Tosef Rucham, when Hashem gathers in, retrieves and brings back their ruach, their animal type souls, Yigvon, then they perish. So they're totally dependent upon Hashem for their sustenance and the length of their lives. However, the Zera Shimshon is reading the pasuk or bringing this pasuk and wanting us to understand it in a different way, a deeper way, which is Tosef Rucham, Hashem adds to their soul Yigvaun, when they perish. And it's a reference to people, tzaddikim and people in general, that their souls are enlarged, their souls grow stronger before, as their bodies weaken, before they perish, before they leave this world. Omnam, however, b'Moshe lo shayach lo markein. The Zera Shimshon says this whole idea doesn't apply to Moshe Rabbeinu. Shahare Ksiv, because the Torah writes about Moshe, Moshe ben Mea ve'esrim shana, and Moshe was 120 years old, bim moso, at the time of his death. Lo cha hasa eino, his eye, his vision was not weakened. Velo nos lecho, and the vigor of his body, the moisture, so to speak, of his body did not depart. So the Torah tells us, it clearly states that Moshe's body did not weaken before he left this world, before he died. And since his body didn't weaken, then this whole idea of the body weakening and the soul becoming stronger would not be relevant to him, was not relevant to Moshe Rabbeinu's actual experience. Shelo nechelash tivo klal, that his natural strengths and abilities did not weaken at all. V'lamar omar hakosov lifnei moso. So why did the Torah say that Moshe blessed the Bnei Yisrael before his death? Demashma hefich zeh, which implies that he wanted to bless them when his body weakened and his soul got stronger. But that's not the case. His body didn't weaken. Mishum hachi pirish Rashi, and now we understand because of that reason, Rashi explains, she'im lo achshav emosai. If it would not be now, right before he died, when would Moshe have been able to bless the people? There was no other time. So let's pause here for a moment. The Zera Shimshon has opened this piece with a quote from Rashi, which explained why the Torah used the words lifnei moso, that Moshe blessed Bnei Yisrael before his death. And the Zera Shimshon asked that Rashi's, apparently it would seem to us that Rashi's explanation was unnecessary, because we could simply explain that Rashi could have simply explained, and it would have been easily understood, that Moshe blessed Bnei Yisrael before he died because of the fact that that's when tzaddikim blessed their children. Their bodies are weakened and their souls are stronger. And as we said, it's an optimum time, a perfect time for the tzaddikim to give brachos. And so that's what Rashi could have explained. Why did he choose not to? So the Zera Shimshon just answered and said, because that whole reasoning only applies to regular people. It doesn't apply to Moshe, whose body did not weaken. The Torah attests to this. His body did not weaken before he died, and therefore that reason would not apply. And so Rashi offered a different explanation, which was a very also straightforward one, that Moshe could only bless them now because he was about to die. Zera Shimshon continues. Ella de adayin kasha, but we still have a problem. De mizeha pasuk, because from this pasuk, meaning the pasuk that taught us that Moshe Rabbeinu did not weaken and his vision didn't dim and his vigor didn't lessen, that he was still strong and all of his physicality even right before he died. This pasuk, Nira, it would appear grius b'Moshe chas v'shalom, that this is a failing on Moshe's part, God forbid. Sheloni tosaf lo koach bin nishmaso. that he didn't experience this increased strength in his neshama before he died, k'mo shar hatzadikim, like the other tzadikim, like we said about Yitzchak, like we said about Yaakov. So the Zera Shimshon is saying, normally we understand the fact that Moshe's body was still strong and he was still very full of energy and strength, and his faculties functioned fully before his death as a tremendous blessing from Hashem, as an amazing thing. But the Zera Shimshon says, actually, this could be viewed as a problem for Moshe, because if his body didn't weaken, then his soul didn't grow stronger before he died. And the strength, the growth and the strength of the soul of a person's neshama before the individual leaves this world is a good thing, is a powerful thing. As we've seen, as the Zera Shimshon has clearly stated, it allows a tzaddik, a righteous person, to give powerful blessings before he leaves this world. But it didn't seem to happen for Moshe. So isn't that a failing on Moshe's part? Isn't that a problem for Moshe that it didn't happen for him? Mishum hachi ba hakasuv, and now the Zera Shimshon says we can understand why the Torah comes and explains at the end of V'Zot HaBracha, v'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe. You might think that Moshe's lacking of a spiritual kind of increase of power before he died means he somehow was lacking. So the Torah says, no, there never was a Navi. There never ever was a prophet among the Jewish people like Moshe. Asher Yidao Hashem Panim El Fanim. Face to face, Hashem related to Moshe face to face, as we read in the pasuk towards the end of the parsha. Shemizen Nishma, because from this we learn Sha'af Bihiyoso Bechayim, even during his lifetime, he didn't have to wait to have this spiritual increase before he died, like everyone else has to do, but rather during his lifetime, way before his death, Zacha L'Tosefes Kedusha V'Ruchanios. Moshe merited to have this increase in holiness and spirituality, Yoser, more Mimashe Zochim Atzadikim Be'es Misasam, more than any other people, righteous people, tzaddikim, have before they die. So the Zera Shimshon is saying that it's actually a strength of Moshe, as a compliment to Moshe, to say that he did not have a weakening of the body and therefore did not have an increase and a growth in the strength of his spiritual power before he died. Why is that a compliment and a unique, a wonderful quality? Because it means that he didn't have to wait until that point. Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama, his soul, received this incredible growth and strength and increase during his lifetime, way before his death. He didn't have to wait till the time of his death. So Moshe Rabbeinu could bless people with tremendous spiritual power without waiting to be close to the time of his passing and leaving this world. Bottom paragraph, V'im Tomar, and if you say she'adayin eina teshuva maspekes, that this is still not an adequate enough explanation, Shahare Kol Yisrael Sheba'oso Hador, all of Bnei Yisrael in that generation, in Moshe's generation, Shamu Kolu Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They listened, they also heard the voice of Hashem. V'ro'u es kevodo, and they saw his glory. B'shas matan Torah, at the time of the giving of the Torah, panim b'fanim, face to face, kedichsiv, as the pasuk says, panim b'fanim diber Hashem imachem, face to face, Hashem spoke with you. Bahar, on the mountain, mitoch ha'esh, top of the next column, from the midst of the fire. So the pasuk clearly states that Bnei Yisrael heard Hashem's voice at that time, of the time of Matan Torah, and they had a direct encounter and revelation of Hashem's presence. Ume'ata, from this, once you read that pasuk, Ein Yisrael LaMoshe Yoser Min Yisrael, you might think that means there was no Yisron, no greater spirituality for Moshe than there was above the level of all of Bnei Yisrael at that time. Lachain, therefore, Hosif, therefore the pasuk and the Torah at the end of V'Zot HaBracha continues, and it says, L'chol ha'osos v'hamofsim asher shalocho Hashem lasos be'eretz Mitzrayim. How do we know of Moshe's unique, extraordinarily unique level of closeness to Hashem and of spiritual power? The Torah continues and says, because Hashem sent him to do wonders and miracles in Mitzrayim. And now we have to pay close attention, because the Zera Shimshon is going to explain why we why we should not take those words lightly and just say, oh, Hashem sent Moshe to lead things and to lead the Jewish people, to do miracles and lead them out of Mitzrayim. That's an old story. Of course, we know sefer Shmos, we know what happened. So the Zera Shimshon says, no, don't miss the incredibly vital point here. V'kosher, because this is actually there's a question on this. Eich asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kain. How did Hashem send Moshe to do the signs and the wonders and the miracles and take out Bnei Yisrael? V'halo, and isn't it true? Hivtiach leYaakov, Hashem had made a promise to Yaakov Avinu, which the Zera Shimshon quotes in part. Anochi ered imcha Mitzrayim. I will go down to Mitzrayim with you, and v'chule, etc. The etc. is very important, because the other words in that pasuk are, I will go down with you and I will surely bring you up. I will bring you out of Mitzrayim. I will go down to Egypt with you, Yaakov Avinu, Hashem says, and I will ultimately bring your descendants, your children, your offspring, Bnei Yisrael, your people, out of Mitzrayim. Hashem said he would do it. And therefore Hashem should have fulfilled his promise to Yaakov Avinu, v'leilech be'atzmo, and to go himself to redeem and to take out the Jewish people, v'lo lishloach shliach, and not to send Moshe as a messenger. Ki de'isa b'medrash, as it states in the Medrash, shemitam zeh, that this is one of the reasons Haya Moshe misarev b'tchila, that Moshe refused in the beginning to go. We all, of course, remember that Hashem had to work very hard to convince Moshe Rabbeinu to actually accept the mission of going to Mitzrayim to redeem and to take out the Jewish people. Moshe had all kinds of, was very stubborn about not going and not thinking it was appropriate for him to go. So the Medrash adds to our usual understanding of this, that one of the reasons Moshe had and offered to Hashem was to say, Hashem, you promised to take out Bnei Yisrael, and you said you would do it yourself. And therefore, how can you send me? I'm a shliach. This will not fulfill your promise by sending me. You yourself should be handling this matter because of your havtacha, because of your promise to Yaakov Avinu. So that is a very big question. So when we read the words at the end of V'Zot HaBracha, at the end of the Torah, at the end of our Parsha, when we read the words that Hashem, that there never was a Navi like Moshe, and one of the components of that is that Hashem sent Moshe to take out the Jewish people, the Zera Shimshon is saying that's exceedingly significant. How could Hashem send Moshe to take out the Jewish people? Hashem was required by his promise, apparently, to do it himself. So the Zera Shimshon continues to explain his point. And therefore we need to say, Moshe Pirshu HaMeforshim, as the commentators explain, Moshe Haya Kimo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Be'atzmo, that Moshe, in a certain way, was comparable, could be compared to Hashem himself. Mishum de hashchina atzma hayusa medaberes misoch grono shel Moshe, because we learned that the Shechina spoke through the throat of Moshe. This is a very important teaching, which is that when we picture the process of Hashem speaking to Moshe and Bnei Yisrael, and then Moshe repeating the words of Hashem to Bnei Yisrael, we picture two different steps. Hashem speaks to Moshe, and Moshe listens and absorbs the information, and then he in turn explains that information to Aaron and to the Zakenim and to ultimately to all of the Jewish people. But we have a teaching that the Zera Shimshon is bringing down that the Shekhinah caused sounds to come out of Moshe's mouth, and that was ke'ilu, that was as if the people listening to Moshe were hearing the voice of the Shekhinah, the voice of Hashem, but coming through the body of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Zera Shimshon is saying we need to understand that Moshe Rabbeinu was, from a certain perspective and in a certain way, almost like it was experiencing Moshe, was almost like experiencing an aspect of Hashem. And that's why Moshe uniquely used the words in the Torah many times, Zeh hadavar, this is the thing, this is the matter that Hashem commanded, Yoser mishar haneviyim, and he used this much more frequently than other Nevi'im, because he could say this, which means when we use the word this, it means I can look at it clearly and directly. Moshe Rabbeinu was saying it's this. It's not something vague. It's not something unclear. It is this in perfect and total clarity that Hashem, this is the message in total and perfect clarity that Hashem once communicated to Bnei Yisrael. Ulefi Zen, according to this idea, this very, very radical and profound idea, according to this, Niskayim Anochi Ered Imoch, then Hashem was able to fulfill the promise he made that I will go down and I will bring you out. Af b'shlichuso shel Moshe, even though he sent Moshe to do the mission. V'niskadesh Moshe af b'hiyoso b'chayim, and therefore we see conclusively that Moshe reached a level of kedusha, of holiness, and of spiritual potency more than any other Navi during his lifetime. He didn't have to wait till an increase in spirituality before his death. V'zehu she'amar hakasav, and now we can understand correctly a pasuk from all the way back in Shmos, Re'ei nisaticha Elohim lefaro. Look, I have made you a master over Paro. But the Zera Shimshon says when the Torah uses the word Elohim there, and we pronounce it Elohim because we use it as a master over Paro, look what the Zera Shimshon says next, Elohim mamish. It actually should be seen in a way as if Moshe was made like Hashem over Paro, because of this aspect of Moshe reaching a madrega, reaching a spiritual level, that in a certain way, things that he said and things that he did, it was if Hashem, it was if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was doing those things, kavayochol ba'atzmo, as if Hashem himself was doing it. V'achar kach hosif, and afterwards the Torah adds, ulechol hayad hachazaka, and all of the great and the mighty hand, lelamdenu, to teach us, she'af al pisha Moshe hayakamo hakadosh baruch hu ba'atzmo, that even though Moshe Rabbeinu had reached this extraordinarily unique level of being in a certain aspect, a representative, and actually having an aspect of being like Hashem, ba'atzmo himself, im kol zeh, with all of this, kishahayu l'tovasan shel Yisrael, when it was for the good of Bnei Yisrael, lo chosh lazeh, Moshe did not concern himself over this high level that he had reached. Ve'osa atzmo ki'ish ba'alma, and he made himself like a regular person. Moshe was willing to lower himself to the level of a regular person if that would be for the benefit of Klal Yisrael. K'Moshe haya b'shibur haluchos, as actually happened during the breaking of the luchos. Sheritzono shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu haya, because the will of Hashem at that time was shelo yishpareim, that Moshe should not break the luchos. V'hu shivron, and nonetheless Moshe broke them. L'tovosan shel Yisrael, for the benefit of Bnei Yisrael, mishum, because shetidon kipenuya, Moshe wanted Bnei Yisrael to be judged vis-a-vis Hashem, in relationship to Hashem, as if Klal Yisrael was an unmarried woman, velo ke'eshes ish, and not like a married woman. Now, let's pause to understand what this reference and these phrases mean. When Moshe Rabbeinu understood clearly that when he would bring down the luchos to Klal Yisrael and they would accept, and he would give the luchos to Klal Yisrael, that this was an act tantamount to kiddushin. This was similar to a marriage ceremony, a kiddushin ceremony between Hashem and Klal Yisrael. Hashem would become the Klal Yisrael, would become betrothed to Hashem. And Moshe, and that would mean that the relationship of Klal Yisrael and Hashem would be similar to, akin to, an Eshes Ish, a married woman. And of course, a married woman has the highest level of strictness in the requirement that she be completely and absolutely loyal to her husband and have no inappropriate connections whatsoever to another man. And so Moshe Rabbeinu, when he saw the Egel Hazav, when he saw the golden calf, and even though, as we've explained before, the Zera Shimshon says it was not the intention of Klal Yisrael, of the Jewish people, to worship the golden calf and to treat it like an idol, unlike the Erev Rav, unlike the mixed multitude of Egyptians that were with them. Nonetheless, Moshe felt, if I bring down the luchos and I actually, so to speak, complete this ceremony, complete the act of taking the luchos, the tablets from Hashem, and giving them to Klal Yisrael and bringing them down and making it a possession of Klal Yisrael, then they will be like a married to Hashem, betrothed to Hashem, and then this Egel Azov will be such an even more horrific violation of the relationship that Hashem has just created with Bnei Yisrael. And therefore, the Zera Shimshon teaches us that Moshe broke the luchos in order to say, no, the ceremony has not been completed, and Klal Yisrael may be viewed as a penuya, can still be viewed as a single woman who has not completed a kiddushin ceremony with her husband, and therefore there's leniency, there's room for leniency in terms of Klal Yisrael, in terms of Bnei Yisrael's committing the avera of the Egel Hazav. Ula Basof, and in the end, even though the Zera Shimshon just said Hashem did not want Moshe to break the luchos, in the end, HaKadosh Baruch Hu hodelo, HaKadosh Baruch Hu admitted to Moshe that it was the right thing to do. Ve'omar, and he said, Yehi shalom ba'oso hayad. There should be peace for that hand. There should be peace and blessings on the hands of Moshe, who made the decision to use his hands to break the luchos. Shenamar, as it says, ulechol hayad hachazaka. Zera Shimshon is teaching us an extraordinary idea that when at the end of the Torah, at the end of V'Zot HaBracha, our Parsha, it says, and another reason how we know Moshe had this special relationship with Hashem and no other human being could ever reach this level, when it says the mighty hand, it's a reference to Moshe's hands that he used to break the luchos. That's the mighty hands. K'di'isa b'medrash Parshas Kisisa, as it states in the Medrash Rabbah on Parshas Kisisa, al pasuk pisal lecha, on the pasuk of carve for yourself the luchos. Of course, that's a reference to the second luchos, v'zeh l'shono, and this is the quote from the Medrash Rabbah. Re'ei shivcho shel Moshe, look at the incredible praise that is due for Moshe. Aaron v'shivim zikenim achuzin biyadav shel Moshe. Aaron and the 70 zikenim were grabbing at the hands of Moshe when he came down with the luchos to prevent him, according to the Medrash, from breaking them. V'lo yachlu lo, and they were not able to stop him. His strength, his determination to break the luchos in order to protect Klal Yisrael, to protect Bnei Yisrael, was so great and powerful that Aaron and the Shivim Zikanim could not stop him from breaking the luchos. Velo elu bilvad, and not only Aaron and the Zikanim, ela afritzono shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it was even the will of Hashem not to break the luchos. Shelo yishparam, and Haya shelo yishparam was that Moshe should not break them. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, l'chol ha'osos ve'hamofsim, all of these signs and wonders. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem said to Moshe, Yehi shalom ba'oso hayad, there should be peace. Again, there should be peace on your hands, Moshe. Shenemar, as it says, l'chol hayad ha'chazaka. V'chuli, these are the mighty hands, ad kan l'shono, until here's a quote from the Medrash. So the Zera Shimshon has done several things here, all of which are awe-inspiring. The first thing is, on the most basic level, that he set himself the goal, you will recall, to connect the beginning of the Parsha with the end of the Parsha, and that he has done certainly in flying colors. The beginning of the Parsha talks about Moshe blessing Bnei Yisrael, and before his death, and it refers to Moshe as Ish HaElokim, the man of God, of a unique term to refer to Moshe. And then at the end of the Parsha, we see that the Torah in the 3 psukim that we read at the end of V'Zot HaBracha talk about Moshe's special uniqueness, and the Zera Shimshon showed us how there's much more there than meets the eye. There's much more there than we realize when we read those psukim. But the fact that Moshe is Ish HaElokim, a man who achieved the highest possible closeness to Hashem, is stated in the first pasuk of the Parsha, and then explained in beautiful detail at the end of the Parsha. So we see that connection that he made. As this piece goes on, the Zera Shimshon fulfills his second goal of connecting the beginning of the Torah with the end of the Torah, but that's beyond the scope of our discussion. So that's the first thing that the Zera Shimshon has done. But in addition to that, the Zera Shimshon has taught us and illuminated for us the idea that Moshe Rabbeinu reached a spiritual level of closeness to Hashem, that when Hashem sent Moshe to Mitzrayim, it was as if from a certain perspective that Hashem himself was going, and that's why Hashem was able to fulfill his promise of personally taking out Bnei Yisrael through sending Moshe to do so. And he elaborated upon this, talking about the voice of Hashem coming out of Moshe's throat, and the idea that when Hashem said, you are going to be a master to Paro, he was actually saying you were going to be as if you're God to Paro, because Moshe had reached that extraordinary madrega, that extraordinary spiritual level. So there's so much to think about here and to continue to reflect upon. Yasher koach to everyone for joining us tonight, and we look forward, B'ezras Hashem, to learning the Zera Shimshon again next week.